Okay, so what I'd like to do first here is I'd like to talk about the different types of bone shapes. There's roughly 6 different types of shapes, and so I want to talk about what are these shapes and what are their unique features. Okay, so these bone shapes, they're listed right here, the bolded words: long, short, flat, sesamoid, sutural, and irregular. Okay, and so what I'd like to do is go through what these are and then show you some examples and also explain some of the ones that might initially seem a little bit tricky or difficult to classify. So if we go over here to the notes packets, okay, you'll see in this table here that we have all of our different types of bone shapes. Okay, and so the first one I want to talk about are flat bones, and these are going to be thin and they have roughly parallel surfaces. Okay, now a lot of times people think flat and they think it has to be something that is straight up and down, okay, but it turns out that's not always the case. Sometimes flat bones, they're thin, they're roughly parallel sheets. This side is in the same plane as the other side, but it may be a little bit curved. It doesn't have to be straight up and down. And so let me give you a few examples now of flat bones. So what we can see right here is actually the top of the skull. Okay, so this here is our skull, and now we're just looking at the top portion of this skull. Okay, so you can see actually that these bones, they're thin. We've roughly got parallel surfaces. This side is roughly flat. It's going in the same direction as this. But as you notice, it's very curved. But this part of the skull, this top part of these skull bones, this is actually flat bones. Okay? Now, this bone here, this is going to be a scapula, your shoulder blade. And you may notice it's got these funky things on it. And so you think, well, that doesn't look flat. But if you look at the majority of this surface, this large surface here, okay, you see that the majority of it actually is flat. And so the scapula is considered a flat bone as well. Other flat bones, we have the sternum, okay, so that's your breastbone right here. So the sternum is very definitely flat, okay. And we've also got the ribs. Again, it may look a bit curved, and it is curved, but it's thin and these surfaces are relatively parallel. So the rib is considered a flat bone as well. And so I'll let you, based on what we just said, I'll let you fill in example bones in this box here. Okay, now the next thing we have is we have sutural bones. These are found between sutures. Okay, now these can be unique. Sutural bones, they're unique for each individual. One individual may have 10, another individual may have none. And so let me see, based on my skull here, if I can show you a sutural bone. Okay, so here is my skull, all right, and if we get it up really close here, what you can hopefully notice is you can see over here these things that look almost like stitches along the skull surface in between the bones, okay? Those are called sutures. Now, a sutural bone is not every bone of the skull, because on the skull they're all going to be combined by sutures. Okay, so that I think shows it a little bit better. So you can see the sutures. Here's a big suture up here that joins these bones. The large bones have specific names and they're not considered sutural bones. But let me turn over here. Okay, right over in this area you can see a small little bone that's completely surrounded by sutures, okay? And so this small little bone, it's not one of the major skull bones. It's completely surrounded by sutures, and that would be an example of a sutural bone. And so each individual is going to have different numbers of sutural bones. Okay? And they may be in different locations as well. Okay. The next type of bone is going to be a long bone. These bones are generally longer than they are wide, and the shaft middle portion is roughly cylindrical. Okay, so the middle portion is roughly like a cylinder. Okay, and so again, let me show you some examples of that. Okay. Okay, so here we have one of the bones in the lower arm. Okay, this is your radius. Okay, and you notice that it's roughly longer than it is wide. Okay, but if we look at its shape, notice it's not flat. Okay, it's roughly round in the middle. It's like a cylinder going down. Now the ends can look unique. So look at the ends on this bone. Okay, so the ends can look funky shaped, and that's okay. Here's another bone. This is your femur. Okay, well, look at the ends on this. They're really funky shaped. Okay, really uniquely shaped. But if we look at it overall, it's roughly longer than it is wide, and this middle portion is roughly shaped like a cylinder going down. Okay, and so those are just two examples of long bones. One example that is a little bit tricky that I'm going to add in here is the clavicle. It looks a little bit flat, but it is actually consider a modified long bone. Okay, so that is one that might be a little bit counterintuitive. Okay, so let's move down here to some of these other types of bones. Okay, so we have irregular bones, and these are the bones that really do not fit into one category or another. They're complex, they have short, flat, notched, and ridged surfaces. Okay, and their name really says what they are. They are irregular. And so let me give you some examples of irregular bones. Okay, so probably one of the best irregular bones to show you is going to be a vertebra. Okay, so this is a vertebra. You can see this one looks a little bit like a moose from the side, but notice there's no clear pattern, there's no clear shape to it. It just has very irregular surface features on it. Okay, so that would be an irregular bone. Another place where we find irregular bones is going to be, okay, here again is our skull. We've taken this top portion. Remember, the top portion has flat bones. Okay, but if we take that off and you look, you're going to see some of the bones in here. This one, you can almost, we'll learn it's the sphenoid, and it looks a little bit like the wings of a bat or a butterfly in there. Very irregularly shaped. So some of these bones that form up the skull are also going to be very irregular. Okay, we're similarly going to find bones of the pelvis. Okay, so here is one of our hip bones. This helps make up our pelvis, our pelvic girdle. You can see very irregularly shaped. Okay, and so those are going to be some of the best examples of irregular bones. I'm going to skip sesamoid for a minute, and I'm going to go here to short bones. These are generally going to be cube shaped, and they tend to be small and boxy. The examples of those are going to be your carpals, which are going to make up your wrist bones, and also your tarsals, which make up parts of your foot. Okay, and so let me show you the carpals. Okay, so here you're going to notice, now these bones down here, all right, these are long bones. Okay, but up top are these small, short roughly cube-shaped bones. Now notice they're not perfect cubes, okay? And that's okay. But they're roughly more like a cube than they are like a cylinder down here. And so all of these up top here, all of those are short bones. Those are all your carpals. Okay, and then the last ones that I want to talk about are your sesamoid bones. These ones are unique because they develop inside of tendons. Okay, so it's more about where they develop. The one that everybody is going to have will be your patella. Okay, now some people may have other sesamoid bones, but it's variable per individual. And let me show you your patella. Okay, the patella, this is it, and it is going to sit on top of your kneecap. Okay, or sorry, it is your kneecap. It sits on the front of your knee joint. So if you're touching your kneecap, you're going to be touching this, and then behind all this is going to be the rest of your knee. Okay, so that is the patella, and that is an example of a sesamoid. So one thing that I would actually recommend that you do at this point is that you go through and look at the pictures of all of the different bones and see if you can classify them into one of the 6 categories that we just talked about. The other thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take all of these bones and classify them into 2 other categories, either axial or appendicular. Okay, axial is shown in this image in the blue color. Okay, so these are all of the axial bones. Okay, and you notice they're along that midline of the body. So we've got the skull bones, we've got all the vertebra going down to your sacrum and your coccyx. We've got this thoracic cage that's made up of your sternum and of the ribs, also of those vertebrae as well. We're going to add a couple of others that belong in this category as well. We're going to add the hyoid bone, which is going to be up in the under top of your neck area, just behind your lower jaw. And then the other thing is the auditory ossicles. These are the tiny bones inside of your ear area. They're actually inside of the skull, and they're going to vibrate when sound waves come into your ear and help convert those sound waves into an actual sound that you can hear, that your brain can perceive. So those are all axial in blue, and then everything else in yellow is going to be appendicular. And so just so you start learning the names of these bones, my suggestion is that you go back up here to your notes and write in the names of all of the axial bones, write in the names of all the appendicular bones.